Hello and welcome to episode 2 of HyperSpace, the fast space breakdown place coming to you from colorful Colorado. In today's episode, we'll break down the slew of space activity that took place over the past few days. June 30th saw a doubleheader launch from both Virgin Orbit and SpaceX, and the 8th OneWeb launch lifted off early this morning from Russia, as well as a booster number 3 rollout at Starbase, Texas, and the upcoming docking of Progress MS-17 to the International Space Station. On today's episode, we'll take a quick look at these two missions from yesterday and discuss the rather different approaches the companies take towards delivering payload to orbit, as well as discussing all of the activity that happened today. That's all coming up on HyperSpace. Starting off today's episode, the first launch of Virgin Orbit's Tubular Bells campaign had a successful mission early yesterday morning. Virgin Orbit's Launcher 1 rocket was released from the modified Boeing 747 Cosmic Girl over the Mojave Desert at 9:47 a.m. Central Time after departing the Mojave Air and Spaceport in California. Launcher 1 is a two-stage orbital rocket fueled by RP-1 and liquid oxygen and is capable of carrying 500 kilograms to low Earth orbit. Tubular Bells Launcher 1 was deployed at an altitude of 9,612 meters by Cosmic Girl, a modified Boeing 747 that once served in Virgin Atlantic's passenger fleet from 2001 to 2015. 3 customer research payloads were atop Launcher 1 this morning, one from the United States Department of Defense, another from the Royal Netherlands Air Force, and one from Sat Revolution, a Polish satellite manufacturer. Virgin Orbit confirmed nominal orbital insertion and the success of the mission shortly after the deployment of the payloads. Even more customer payloads took to the skies yesterday. 85 rideshare payloads were launched by SpaceX from Cape Canaveral Space Force Station's Space Launch Complex 40 in Florida at 2:31 p.m. Central Time. These payloads included a variety of spacecraft and small satellites, as well as space tugs, which are small independent spacecraft that deploy small sats to orbit. The popularity of microsats and CubeSats has opened up space to more entities than ever before, and the Transporter campaign is SpaceX's first attempt to take a place among leading small sat launchers. Additionally, Transporter 2 carried 3 Starlink internet satellites on yesterday's mission. The deployment sequence began 57 minutes and 53 seconds after liftoff and concluded at T+1 hour, 27 minutes and 44 seconds. Mission success was confirmed by SpaceX Mission Control in Hawthorne, California shortly after. Yesterday's mission was lofted to sun-synchronous orbit via a polar launch trajectory. Unlike standard equatorial launches that are sent east with the rotation of the Earth, polar launches are sent north and, as the name implies, pass over both the north and south poles of Earth. Falcon 9 followed the east coast polar vector to sun-synchronous orbit. This orbital type is designed to maintain constant sunlight on payloads, eliminating the need for rechargeable batteries or other power generation methods for when solar panels cannot be used. This helps keep both the weight and cost of small sats as low as possible. The Transporter 2 mission had been scrubbed the previous day at T-11 seconds to launch due to a helicopter violating the restricted zone that is maintained for all launches. Transporter 2 was carried to orbit by Falcon 9 booster 1060. This is the 8th flight of the booster, and 1060 successfully returned to Cape Canaveral for a picture-perfect landing at Landing Zone 1, 8 minutes and 29 seconds after liftoff. This was the first return-to-launch site landing for booster 1060 and the 89th successful recovery of a Falcon 9 first-stage booster for SpaceX. The previous 7 flights of 1060 had landed on one of SpaceX's automated spaceport drone ships. And speaking of SpaceX's remote landing platforms, Of Course I Still Love You has made its way through the Panama Canal and is on its way to the west coast of the United States to service Falcon 9 launches from Vandenberg Space Force Base in the coming months. The other drone ship, Just Read the Instructions, remains in Port Canaveral, where it will eventually be joined by a shortfall of Gravitas, a brand new landing barge that is currently in the final stages of construction. The nose cone fairing halves were also reused on today's mission, making their way to space for the 3rd time. The HOS Briarwood, a chartered vessel, was positioned in the Atlantic Ocean to recover these fairings for future reuses. Moving on to July 1st, the 8th batch of internet satellites for the OneWeb constellation project were dispatched to orbit early this morning from Russia. OneWeb is one of a number of in-progress satellite constellations currently being built in low Earth orbit. As the name implies, OneWeb will provide high-speed satellite internet access to customers across the globe. Satellite internet comes without the need for expensive infrastructure, a major benefit in rural areas. The first phase of the constellation project requires 648 satellites in total. OneWeb launches their satellites from France, Kazakhstan, and Russia. Today's launch of 36 satellites was serviced by a Soyuz 2.1B. This particular model of Soviet-derived Soyuz is capable of carrying over 5,000 kilograms of payload to space. The mission lifted off at 7:48 a.m. Central Time from Vostochny Cosmodrome Site 1S in Russia, with Ariane Space taking charge of operating today's mission. This was the fifth launch of OneWeb from Vostochny. The first was launched by Arianespace in France, with the second and third launches taking to space from Baikonur in Kazakhstan. The next OneWeb mission is slated for liftoff from Baikonur in early August. Rounding off this episode's discussion of active spaceflight, Progress MS-17 will rendezvous with the International Space Station later this evening. Progress is scheduled to dock with the ISS at 8:02 p.m. Central Time via Roscosmos' Poist docking module. The vehicle will deliver more than 1,600 kilograms of cargo to the orbital laboratory, including food, fuel, and science experiments. And finally, we'll make our way to South Texas for the Boca Chica roundup. It was a massive day at SpaceX's Starbase. First up, the seventh segment of the orbital launch tower was raised into place at the Orbital Launch Complex. This was the last full-size segment to be stacked, with an eighth half-size segment to be added in the coming days. Upon completion, the OLT will be the largest structure in South Texas. Later in the day, the BN3 SuperHeavy booster was rolled out of the high bay at the build site and delivered to Suborbital Test Stand A, where it was promptly lifted and attached by Starbase's massive crane. There are no plans for BN3 to leave the ground. Instead, it will be used for a series of pressure tests and possibly even static fires to gauge the integrity of the current design and build methods. That's all for today's episode of HyperSpace. In the coming days, we'll watch for the beginning of BN3's test campaign in Boca Chica, as well as a Long March 4C launch from the CNSA in Jiuquan, China. That launch is currently slated for no earlier than July 7th. If you enjoyed today's episode, please share it with your friends and family and be sure to stay tuned for the next episode. Thanks for listening.